$10 million. She told me to get lost. I looked at the impossibly beautiful, ice-cold face in front of me and almost laughed. Isabella Vance, my ex-fiancée, the formidable CEO of Vance Corporation. She probably expected me to break down, to plead, maybe even tear up the check in a fit of righteous anger. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that after 3 long years trapped in this story, I had been waiting for this day for a very, very long time. Chapter 1, Ethan, we're done. Isabella's voice was as frigid as her stare. She slid a cashier's check across the vast mahogany desk, her slender fingers a pale white against the dark wood. Here's $10 million. Get out of New York, and don't ever let me see you again. I picked up the check, blew on the non-existent dust, and counted the zeros. Yep, all there. Perfect. My startup capital had arrived. 3 years ago, I woke up in the body of Ethan Cole, the worthless, universally despised fiancé of the female lead in a trashy romance novel titled The CEO's Secret Bodyguard. I was the quintessential plot device, a walking, talking joke whose only purpose was to act like an idiot, get humiliated by the novel's hero, and finally serve as the catalyst for Isabella to break off our engagement before meeting a miserable end. For 3 years, I played my part to perfection. I was the trust fund brat who knew nothing but country clubs and designer labels, a parasite clinging to the Vance family name. I spent my days getting drunk at exclusive lounges and my nights dropping obscene amounts of money on things I didn't need. I had etched the word loser into the mind of every person in New York's upper echelon. Isabella's gaze, once tinged with reluctant duty, had long since curdled into pure, unadulterated disgust. And it was all going exactly according to plan. In the original story, my character, after being dumped, foolishly tries to pick a fight with the hero, some ex-Special Forces badass, and ends up completely ruined. I wasn't that stupid. My goal was simple from day one. Get the severance package, find a quiet place somewhere beautiful, and finally start living my life. What? Not enough for you? Isabella's brow furrowed when I stayed silent, her perfect face a mask of impatience. Nope, it's plenty, I said, quickly stuffing the check into my jacket pocket before she could change her mind. Thanks for the generosity, Ms. Vance. I wish you, in your true, love a lifetime of happiness. Her expression froze. This, clearly, was not the reaction she'd anticipated. No anger, no desesperación. Just relief, joy even. You. She seemed to want to say something more, but it dissolved into a cold huff. Good, as long as you understand. Remember what you said and stay out of my sight. Forever. You got it, I said, nodding like a bobblehead. I turned and walked out, my steps so light I felt like I could float. I could feel her stare drilling into my back, 2 daggers of pure ice. I could only imagine her confusion, her irritation. A parasite, when ripped from its host, wasn't supposed to celebrate. For a control freak like her, my cheerful departure was probably more insulting than if I'd cursed her out. Stepping out of the towering Vance Corporation building, the afternoon sun felt warm on my face. I took a deep, long breath. Freedom. It smelled sweet. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 3 years. Arthur. Mr. Cole. The voice on the other end trembled with excitement. You finally called. I'm retired, I said, keeping it short. What? Arthur Chun was clearly confused. Send everything you've been preparing for me to Havenwood Creek. As for all my assets, you'll continue to manage them. Just wire me the dividends on schedule. Don't bother me with anything else. But Mr. Cole, the microchip venture in Germany just... Stop, I cut him off. I don't want to hear it. I have only one rule from now on. Do not disturb my retirement. I hung up and hailed a cab. JFK, please. Isabella Vance. And this entire suffocating city, goodbye. Your corporate wars, your tangled romances, they have nothing to do with me anymore. From this day forward, my name is Ethan Cole, and I'm officially off the clock. Chapter 2. Havenwood Creek, a place you had to zoom in on 3 times on Google Maps just to find. A sleepy little town nestled in the mountains, full of covered bridges, stone walls, and air that smelled of damp earth and pine. This was the place I'd chosen to live out the rest of my days. I bought the largest house in town, a rambling old farmhouse with a wraparound porch and renovated it to my exact specifications. I planted a garden, put up a trellis for grapevines, built a brick oven and a smokehouse, and next to it, the brewery I'd always dreamed of. Life wasn't a track to be run, but a field to be wandered. I was just choosing the path with the best scenery. The days melted into a comfortable rhythm. I tend to my garden, experiment with new recipes, brew beer, and occasionally fish in the creek that ran behind my property. I worked my way through Julia Child's entire cookbook. The smell of my peach ale became a local landmark. The stress from my past life, the one before all this, finally began to wash away. One afternoon, I was in the yard, filleting a trout I'd just caught, planning on making an almondine, when I heard a soft knock on my gate. "Excuse me? Is Mr. Cole home?" The voice was gentle, melodic. I wiped my hands on a towel and went to open it. Standing, there was a young woman in a simple linen dress, her long, dark hair falling past her waist. She had kind eyes and a warmth that seemed to radiate from her. In her hands was a woven basket filled with freshly picked wild strawberries, their red color a vibrant splash against the green leaves. I paused for a second. It was her, Clara Mae Thompson. Aside from the scenery, she was the other reason I'd chosen Havenwood Creek. In the original novel, she was a minor character, a local girl the hero briefly noticed and was struck by. Her family was the real deal, old, quiet money, with more history and class than 100 new money families like the Van Cess. But her parents were progressive, letting her run a small bed and breakfast in her hometown to find herself. In the book, this angelic girl made the mistake of showing a little admiration for the hero, which earned her the wrath of one of his jealous love interests. Her story ended with her leaving town, her fate unknown. I always thought it was a damn shame. Now that I was here, things would be different. This girl? I was going to make sure nothing bad happened to her. "I'm him," I said, pretending not to know her. "Can I help you?" "My name is Clara," she said, a small smile revealing a dimple in her cheek. "I live just next door. I always smell the most wonderful things coming from your kitchen, and my grandmother just made a fresh blueberry cobbler. I wanted to bring you some." She held out a small dish covered in a checker cloth. I took it, the warmth seeping into my fingertips. "Thank you," I said, my voice genuine. "I was just about to make trout almondine. If you're not busy, why don't you stay and have dinner?" Clara's eyes lit up, but she hesitated. "Oh, I wouldn't want to impose." "Not at all. I hate eating alone," I said, stepping aside to let her in. Consider it a trade for the cobbler. Chapter 3. Clara ended up staying. When I brought the trout to the table, perfectly browned and glistening with butter and toasted almonds, her eyes went wide. "Ethan, you can actually cook like this?" "I dabble," I said modestly, also setting down a fresh salad from the garden and a pitcher of homemade iced tea. She took a tentative bite of the fish. Her expression shifted from surprise to pure bliss. "Oh wow, this is incredible. It's flaky and savory, and it's better than anything I've had at the fancy restaurants in the city." "Glad you like it. Eat up." Seeing her so happy made me feel a simple, uncomplicated joy I hadn't felt in years. Over dinner, we talked about everything. The history of Havenwood Creek, our favorite books, our dreams. I learned that Clara wasn't just beautiful. She was brilliant, with a deep love for art and history. More than that, she had a calming presence. Being with her felt like slowing down, like the world outside this little bubble of peace didn't matter. "So, Ethan, why did you decide to move here?" she asked after a while, her cheeks slightly flushed from the warm evening air. "You don't seem like you're from around here." "I was tired," I said, sipping my tea. It was the truth, just not the whole truth. Tired of running on a hamster wheel for other people. I decided it was time to live for myself. She nodded, a flicker of understanding, and maybe something like sympathy in her eyes. In the weeks that followed, Clara became a regular visitor. She'd bring over fresh eggs from her chickens, and I'd have a new dish ready for her to try. She taught me how to identify wildflowers, and I showed her how to use the herbs from my garden. Sometimes she'd just sit on the porch swing and read while I worked in my brewery. We could spend a whole afternoon in comfortable silence. One day, she watched me splitting firewood in the yard, my shirt off, sweat tracing lines down my stomach. I caught her staring, a deep blush coloring her cheeks. You're in really good shape," she mumbled, her eyes darting away, and then, almost against her will, back to my abs. I stopped, leaning on the axe, and walked a few steps closer, grinning. The sweat on my brow was close enough to drip on her. "Want to see for yourself?" I murmured. Her face turned the color of a ripe tomato. She waved her hands frantically, flustered, but I saw her swallow hard. No. No, thank you. Seeing her like that, so flustered and cute, was the best part of my day. Teasing her was quickly becoming my new favorite hobby. The air between us was thick with unspoken feelings, a tension that was both thrilling and sweet. We were standing on a ledge, and all it would take was one small step. But just as things were about to change, a storm was brewing hundreds of miles away in New York. A storm with my name at its center. Chapter 4 Shocker. Vance Corp CEO dumps fiancé. Kept man takes $10 million payout to retire in the woods. The headline, splashed across a dozen gossip sites, went viral overnight. The accompanying photos were a paparazzi shot of my carefree exit from the airport and a stark, regal profile of Isabella looking furious. The comment section was a war zone. "El mio, this guy is my hero. Get paid, get out. The dream. 10 million to retire? Is he serious? That's like a down payment on a decent one-bedroom in Manhattan. Read the article. Genius. He moved to the middle of nowhere. He's gonna live like a king out there. Am I the only one who feels bad for Isabella? 3 years wasted on this deadbeat. She literally paid him to go away. Seriously, what a leech. He's got a pretty face and nothing else. She's better off without him." In her penthouse office overlooking Central Park, Isabella's best friend and executive assistant handed her a tablet, a smug look on her face. "See, Izzy, what did I tell you? Ethan Cole is a lost cause. He took the money and ran off to some hick town. The man has zero ambition." Isabella stared at the screen, at the comments mocking me, at the blurry photo of me fishing in a creek, a huge, goofy grin on my face. For some reason, she didn't feel the vindication she expected. Instead, a strange, unfamiliar annoyance began to bubble up inside her. She had expected me to be humiliated, to fight back, to use that 10 million to try and build something to prove her wrong. But I hadn't. I just took the money and left. And I looked so happy about it, as if escaping her was the best thing that had ever happened to me. "He's a nobody. He's not worth my time," Isabella said, swiping the screen off. Her voice was colder than the autumn air outside. "Tell PR to kill this story. I don't want to see his name anywhere ever again." "You got it," her friend said, then paused. "By the way, Sterling Group is still giving us hell on the green energy project. They've poached 3 of our lead engineers and somehow keep beating us to every patent. The stock has dropped for 3 days straight." Isabella's jaw tightened. The Sterlings were their oldest rivals. Lately, they've been on an impossible winning streak. "I am aware. I'll handle it," she said, rubbing her temples. Later that night, after hours of dealing with corporate fires, she found herself inexplicably pulling up the article about me again. She stared at my carefree, smiling face, then picked up her phone and dialed. "I want you to find someone for me. Ethan Cole. I want to know everything he's doing." I, of course, knew nothing about this. I was lounging in an Adirondack chair on my porch, sipping a glass of iced tea and talking on the phone with Arthur. "Mr. Cole, your Polaris Capital Fund posted a quarterly profit of $3.2 billion. The funds have been transferred to your personal account," he said. "HM. Also, as you instructed me to monitor, the Sterling Group has been making aggressive moves, specifically targeting Vance Corporation's stock price." "Oh, that caught my interest. How's Isabella holding up?" "Ms. Vance is struggling," Arthur said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "Sterling seems to have a secret weapon. They've successfully anticipated every one of Vance Corp's strategic moves. There's a lot of panic in her boardroom." I smiled. Secret weapon? That was just one of the many little pieces I had put on the board 3 years ago, a failsafe intended to cause trouble for the novel's hero down the line. The secret weapon at Sterling was a brilliant analyst I had personally recruited and funded. My only instruction to him was that, after my disappearance, he should relentlessly attack any company the book's hero was destined to get involved with. Vance Corporation just happened to be the biggest prize on that list. What a beautiful coincidence. "Mr. Cole, should we intervene?" "To help Ms. Vance?" Arthur asked. "Help her." I laughed. Why would I do that? A little dose of reality will do her good. Might knock that stick out of her. And the Sterling Group? Let them play, I said lightly. But don't let them go too far. If they actually bankrupt Vance Corp, the game gets boring. Just give Sterling a little nudge. Rattle their cage a bit. I don't want their dramas spilling over and ruining my peace and quiet. Understood, sir. Arthur's voice was suddenly electric with energy. He was my most competent manager, but also a complete workaholic. My asking him to rattle their cage was like giving a shark a drop of blood. My one fatal flaw as a boss who just wanted to retire was that I had hired a team of absolute killers. I hung up and went back to enjoying the sunset. Meanwhile, in New York, a financial earthquake was about to begin. Polaris Capital, the silent, monstrously powerful firm that haunted global markets, stirred from its slumber. With a casual flick of its wrist, it sent a tremor through the Sterling Group's foundations. A key acquisition suddenly lost its funding. Their entire R&D team was exposed for academic fraud. Their most profitable overseas market was swallowed whole by an anonymous competitor overnight. The Sterling Group's stock didn't just fall. It swan-dived off a cliff. And just like that, the siege on Vance Corporation was inexplicably over. Isabella was completely baffled. She watched her company's stock not only stabilize but rebound to a new record high, her mind reeling in confusion. Her team had been preparing for a corporate war, and then the enemy had just imploded. What happened? Can anyone tell me what the hell just happened? She demanded in an emergency board meeting, her voice tight. Her executives just stared at each other, dumbfounded. Ms. Vance, it seems Polaris Capital made a move. One of them finally stammered. Polaris? Isabella froze. The legendary, untouchable investment firm? The one that never missed? Why would they help her? Vance Corp had no connection to them whatsoever. Find out why, she commanded. I want to know everything. But no matter who she called, she came up empty. Polaris Capital was a ghost. No one knew who ran it. No one knew its motives. The bizarre victory felt less like a rescue and more like a warning, a sign that some invisible hand was moving pieces on a board she couldn't even see. Miles away, I was dealing with a crisis of my own. Ethan misses. Gable down the road is sick, Clara said, her face clouded with worry. Her son is working overseas and can't get back. She said the one thing she's craving is the lobster thermidor from the Gilded Sparrow in the city. But the Gilded Sparrow, New York's most famous 3 Michelin star restaurant. Their signature dishes had a wait list that was months long. No problem, I said, patting her hand. I pulled out my phone and dialed the restaurant's owner directly. Leo, it's Ethan. Ethan, my friend, where have you been hiding? It's been too long. You must come by the restaurant, critique the new menu. The voice on the other end was overwhelmingly enthusiastic. Cut the crap, Leo. I need your best lobster thermidor, and I need it delivered by helicopter to Havenwood Creek. I'm texting you the address now. Fast. Consider it done. It will be there in 2 hours, guaranteed. When I hung up, Clara was staring at me, as if I'd just performed a magic trick. You can just call the Gilded Sparrow and have them send a helicopter? The owner and I go way back, I said with a shrug. An hour and a half later, the distinct thump-thump-thump of rotor blades echoed through the valley. A sleek black helicopter appeared over the trees and hovered above my backyard. A man in a chef's uniform rappelled down on a rope, carrying an insulated silver case, which he presented to me with a bow. The entire town had come out to watch. Is that a helicopter? It's landing at Ethan's place. Who is this guy? Claire's jaw was on the floor. She was utterly speechless. I took the case, then gently took her hand, which was still cool to the touch. Come on, I said softly. Let's not keep Mrs. Gable waiting. I'd only meant to solve a small problem for a sweet old lady. I hadn't meant to blow my cover quite so spectacularly. Mrs. Gable cried tears of joy when she tasted the warm, rich lobster. And Clara, watching me, had a new kind of light in her eyes. It was more than affection now. It was awe. My reputation as the mysterious benefactor of Havenwood Creek was sealed. The townspeople treated me with a new level of warmth, constantly leaving fresh vegetables and baked goods on my porch. I didn't mind. What I cared about was the change in Clara. She started doing little things for me. She'd quietly tend to the rare orchids I was trying to grow. When I was deep in a cooking project, she'd appear by my side, silently washing dishes and prepping ingredients. I once caught her secretly measuring one of my shirts, and a week later, she presented me with a perfectly tailored linen shirt she had sewn herself. It was more comfortable than anything I'd ever bought. One evening, a few drunk guys from out of town started causing trouble at her B&B, harassing the guests and making crude comments to her. I happened to be walking over to see her and saw one of them grab her arm. A cold anger I hadn't felt in years washed over me. "Let her go," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. The leader, a guy with bleached hair and a cheap tattoo, turned to me and sneered. "Look what we got here. Prince Charming. You have any idea who I am, pretty boy?" I didn't waste time with words. I walked forward and clamped my hand around his wrist. There was a sharp, clean snap. He screamed, a high-pitched, pathetic sound, as his hand bent back at an unnatural angle. His friends froze, their drunken bravado vanishing in an instant. They hadn't expected the quiet guy from the farmhouse to be so fast, so brutal. I let him go, and he crumpled to the floor, cradling his broken wrist. I crouched down and patted his cheek. "Now, do you know who I am?" "Igriega. I know. I'm sorry. It won't happen again," he sobbed. "Get out." They practically fell over each other, scrambling to get him out the door. The whole thing was over in less than a minute. I turned back to Clara. Her eyes were wide and red-rimmed. I thought she was scared, but before I could say anything, she threw her arms around me and held on tight. "Ethan." Her voice was muffled against my chest, thick with emotion. It wasn't fear. It was relief. I held her, stroking her back until she stopped shaking. "It's okay," I whispered. "You're okay." After that night, the look in her eyes changed for good. It was love, plain and simple, mixed with a fierce new trust and a healthy dose of hero worship. The last thin wall between us had finally crumbled. "Ethan, what should we name her?" Clara was sitting on the porch swing, cuddling a small, all-white kitten that had wandered into my yard and decided to stay. Interestingly, Clara had an all-black cat at her place, and the two of them were already inseparable. "Well, you have Shadow. I'm Ethan. Let's call her Ghost," I suggested. "No, that's too simple," she said, pouting. She thought for a moment, and her eyes lit up with mischief. "I have an idea. You can call your cat Clara, and I'll call my cat Ethan. How about that?" I saw right through her little game. This wasn't about the cats. "I love it," I said, playing along. From then on, the yard was filled with our voices. "Ethan, come here. It's time for dinner." "Clara, stop teasing Ethan." It became our own private joke, our secret way of saying each other's names all day long. That night, we were sitting on the porch watching the stars when she leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear. "Ethan," she whispered, "can I touch your abs now?" I laughed, catching her hand and placing it flat against my stomach. "Be my guest." Her fingers were soft as they traced the muscles there, sending a shiver through me. Her breathing grew shallow. I tilted her chin up, her face illuminated by the moonlight, her eyes dark and deep. The moment was perfect. I was leaning in when my phone buzzed, shattering the spell. It was a text meant for Isabella, accidentally forwarded to an old number of mine that was still, for some reason, linked to her account. From Pierce Investigations target, Ethan Cole. Location, Havenwood Creek. Status, thriving. Associate, Clara May Thompson. Relationship, intimate. Note, Thompson family background is significant. Old New England money. Deeper roots and quieter wealth than Vance Corp. Significantly more. In New York, Isabella read the same message. An abandoned plaything she'd tossed aside hadn't just survived, he'd upgraded. He'd found someone whose family was more established, whose beauty was more natural, whose life was more peaceful. A bitter, acidic feeling churned in her stomach. She stared out at the glittering skyline of the city she ruled, and for the first time in her life, she questioned if she had made a terrible mistake. Isabella didn't sleep that night. The private investigator's words echoed in her mind. Deeper roots. Quieter wealth. Then she thought about the Sterling Group's sudden collapse and the mysterious intervention from Polaris Capital. Could there be a connection? The idea was insane. She dismissed it immediately. Ethan Cole, a worthless, lazy fool she had tolerated for 3 years? The idea that he could be connected to a global powerhouse like Polaris was laughable. It had to be a coincidence. Clara Thompson was probably just another naive girl, blinded by a handsome face. Yes, that had to be it. But the more she tried to convince herself, the more agitated she became. She made a decision. She would go to Havenwood Creek herself. She would see it with her own eyes. She would pull back the curtain and show that small-town girl exactly what kind of man she'd fallen for, a pathetic fraud, a con artist who lived off women. She would savor the look on his face when he was exposed and abandoned all over again. The next morning, she canceled all her meetings. Her driver brought her custom Rolls-Royce Phantom to the front of the building. She was going to launch a surprise attack. She wanted to catch him completely off guard. When the gleaming black car rolled into the quaint, rustic town of Havenwood Creek, it was like a spaceship landing in the 18th century. People stopped and stared. Dressed in a Chanel power suit and towering heels, flanked by two imposing bodyguards, Isabella stepped out of the car. She put on her sunglasses, a queen descending into the realm of peasants. She followed the address to my farmhouse. The gate was slightly ajar. From inside, she could hear the sound of laughter and the delicious smell of food cooking on a grill. She frowned and pushed the gate open, and then she saw it. A scene that would be burned in her memory forever. Under the grapevine trellis, the rustic wooden table was laden with food. I was wearing the simple linen shirt Clara had made for me, holding a piece of perfectly glazed barbecue rib. I blew on it gently before holding out to Clara's lips. "Open up." She grinned, her eyes crinkling at the corners, and took a bite, a blissful smile spreading across her face. The dappled sunlight filtered through the leaves, painting the scene in strokes of gold. It was disgustingly perfect, and I, the man she remembered as a useless layabout, was looking at this other woman with a tenderness and adoration she had never, ever seen. His eyes shined when he looked at her. Isabella felt a physical pain in her chest, sharp and suffocating. This was worse than any business deal gone wrong. This hurt. She had imagined 100 different scenarios for our reunion. None of them looked like this. He wasn't broken. He wasn't struggling. He was happy, happier than he had ever been with her. "Ethan," her voice, sharp and cold, shattered the peaceful moment. Clara and I both turned. I wasn't surprised to see her standing there, a thundercloud in couture. Clara, however, just looked confused by the intimidating stranger at our gate. Well, if it isn't Ms. Vance," I drawled, leaning back in my chair with a lazy smile. "What brings a titan of industry like you to my humble little corner of the world?" Isabella ignored me, her gaze fixed on Clara with a hostile, appraising intensity. "You must be Miss Thompson." "I am," Clara said, standing up politely. "And you are?" "I'm Ethan's ex-fiancée," she said, her voice dripping with venom, emphasizing every syllable. "Isabella Vance." Clara's smile tightened for a fraction of a second, but she didn't flinch. She glanced at me, not with suspicion, but with a silent question. I gave her a small, reassuring nod. Isabella saw the exchange, and her frustration deepened. Why wasn't this girl shocked? Why wasn't she angry? "Miss Thompson, I came here as a courtesy. To warn you," Isabella said, her tone dripping with condescending pity. "You don't know the man you're with. He's a professional leech. A con man who preys on women. I had to pay him $10 million just to get him out of my life. I'd hate to see you get hurt by his lies." She expected outrage, tears, an accusation. Instead, Clara listened patiently, then offered a serene smile. "Thank you for your concern, Miss Vance." She then walked over to me, took my arm, and squeezed it, a gesture of unwavering solidarity. "But I trust my own judgment, and I trust him." She looked directly at Isabella, her gentle voice now laced with steel. "Besides, $10 million? If he asked me for $100 million, I'd get it to him tomorrow." The color drained from Isabella's face. The one weapon she thought she had, her wealth, her power, had just been rendered utterly insignificant. The dramatic, messy scene she had come to create had been defused with a quiet, unshakable loyalty. Clara's words were a clean, stinging slap across the face. "You—" Isabella was trembling with rage, speechless. "You came all this way, Ms. Vance. You sure you don't want to stay for lunch?" I asked cheerfully, gesturing to the table. "I make a pretty mean rack of ribs. You won't find anything like this in New York." My casual indifference and Clara's fierce defense were two knives twisting in her gut. She looked at me, really looked at me, and realized she was staring at a stranger. Was this the same man she'd known? Where was the pathetic, insecure boy who lived in her shadow? Why could he look at her now without a trace of fear? And how had he earned the devotion of a woman like Clara Thompson? The question spun in her head, unanswered and terrifying. "No, thank you," Isabella said, clinging to the last shred of her dignity. "I just wanted to see how pathetic your life had become. Now that I have, I can leave in peace." She turned and marched away, but her retreat looked more like a flight. As soon as she was gone, Clara let out a little giggle, leaning against my shoulder. "Ethan, that ex of yours. She doesn't seem very bright." "She's not stupid," I said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Just arrogant. Now forget about her. These ribs are getting cold." Isabella's visit was nothing more than a brief interruption. But back in New York, the encounter gnawed at her. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. She put her entire corporate intelligence division to work, digging into me, into Clara, into Havenwood Creek. The more they dug, the more horrified she became. She discovered that Clara wasn't just an heiress. She was a prodigy in her own right, the anonymous manager of a wildly successful boutique hedge fund. And then came the final report, the one on me. For 3 years, her worthless fiancé had done nothing but spend her money, except for one small transaction, one single wire transfer. It was the seed money he'd used to register a shell corporation, a corporation named Polaris Capital. Polaris. When Isabella read that name, she felt the blood freeze in her veins. "No, it's not possible. It's absolutely impossible." Isabella swept everything off her desk in a single, violent motion. She was shaking, not with anger, but with a deep, primal fear. Ethan Cole was the founder of Polaris Capital. The man she had mocked and discarded like trash was the shadowy figure who could make or break global economies with a single phone call. The miracle that had saved her company wasn't a coincidence. It was a casual act of pity from the man she'd exiled. He wasn't a loser. He was just playing a game. A 3-year-long game where the punchline was her own staggering arrogance. All her scorn, all her condescension, all her disgust. It was all a joke. And she was the punchline. She, Isabella Vance, was the biggest fool in New York City. As she stood there, hyperventilating, her private line rang. She answered it numbly. "Ms. Vance? This is Arthur Chun. I'm Mr. Cole's executive assistant." The voice was polite, professional, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Mr. Cole." "Yes, Mr. Cole asked me to inform you that the game is over. He is no longer interested in you or in Vance Corporation. He respectfully asks that you refrain from disturbing him and his wife in the future." "His wife?" The word caught in her throat. "Yes, Miss Clara Thompson will soon be Mrs. Cole," Arthur said, a hint of genuine warmth finally entering his voice. "Oh, and one more thing. Mr. Cole said that, for old time's sake, he wanted to send you a parting gift." "A gift?" He suggested you take a look at the Sterling Group's stock ticker. With trembling hands, Isabella pulled up the market data on her computer. The ticker symbol for Sterling Group was grayed out. Next to it was a single word: delisted. The corporate empire that had nearly brought her to her knees had been erased from existence in a matter of hours. Wiped out, and it was all done as a casual parting gift. The sheer scale of that power was inconceivable. Isabella collapsed into her chair, the strength gone from her legs. She finally understood what she had lost. She hadn't just pushed away a man. She had thrown away a god. Back in Havenwood Creek, I got the call from Arthur. "Mr. Cole, it's done. And from what I hear, Ms. Vance is taking it rather hard." "Good to know," I said, completely unconcerned. Isabella was a character in a book I was no longer a part of. Tying up that loose end meant I could finally, truly, relax into the life I'd built with Clara. "Sir, about your wedding to Mrs. Cole," Arthur began, already shifting into hyper-efficient mode. "I've tentatively booked a private island in the Maldives. The world's top 10 event planners are on standby." "Arthur, stop," I said, pinching the bridge of my nose. "I'll handle my own wedding. Don't you have a Fortune 500 company to acquire or something?" I hung up just as Clara came out onto the porch with 2 bowls of homemade peach ice cream. "Who was that?" "Telemarketer. I lied smoothly, taking a bowl. It was perfect. Ethan, she said, suddenly serious as she sat down beside me. Are you hiding things from me? I kept my expression neutral. Like what? Like the fact that you're not just some guy who's good in the kitchen, she said, ticking points off on her fingers. You can summon helicopters. You can make powerful CEOs run away with their tails between their legs. I put my bowl down and took her hand, stopping her. Clara, the only thing you need to know is that whoever I am, whatever I've done, my feelings for you are the most real thing in my life. She looked into my eyes for a long moment. Then her shoulders relaxed, and she smiled. Okay, I believe you, she said softly. And I have a secret, too. Oh, now I was intrigued. I'm not just a small-town B&B owner, she confessed, a shy look on her face. I run a small hedge fund on the side. Last year it accidentally. Well, it cleared a little over $1 billion. I looked at her adorable whoops I made $1 billion expression. I burst out laughing. Of course she did. So, Miss Moneybags, I whispered, leaning in close. Are you still interested in keeping a trophy husband around? Her face flushed a brilliant shade of crimson. She playfully punched my chest. Shut up. I'll keep you forever. Our wedding wasn't on a private island. It was right there in my backyard in Havenwood Creek. It was simple, perfect, and ours. There were no celebrities or reporters, just the good people of our little town and our closest family. Clara's parents adored me, especially after they discovered my cooking skills were on par with any Michelin star chef, and my homemade beer was better than anything they could import. On our wedding day, Clara wore a simple white dress that I had designed for her, embroidered with tiny seed pearls. She looked ethereal. We exchanged vows under the grapevine trellis, surrounded by the people who had become our family. From now on, I promised her, my voice thick with emotion, my world is you. Tears welled in her eyes as she smiled back at me. And my world is you. That same day, in a sterile Manhattan penthouse, Isabella Vance sat alone in the dark, scrolling through blurry photos of our wedding that had been posted on a local town's social media page. She saw the two of us, holding each other, our faces lit up with a joy so pure it was almost painful to look at. She stared at the images until her phone screen went dark, reflecting her own pale, haunted face. A single, silent tear traced a path down her cheek. She hadn't just lost. She had been annihilated. Married life was even better than I could have imagined. It was slow, sweet, and filled with simple pleasures. I cooked, I brewed, I fished, and I loved my wife. Clara, having handed the reins of her fund over to a trusted team, joined me in blissful retirement. My other life, the Polaris Capital Empire, continued its relentless growth under Arthur's obsessive management. The hashtag Ethan's probably still sleeping would occasionally trend on Twitter whenever one of my companies had a massive surge, and the legend of the absentee billionaire who just wanted to be left alone became a running joke in the financial world. None of it mattered to me. I was just Ethan Cole of Havenwood Creek, Clara's husband. One perfect autumn afternoon, we were curled up in a hammock in the yard, reading. Our two cats, one black and one white, were asleep in a patch of sun at our feet. Ethan, Clara said, breaking the comfortable silence. Do you think we're living a fairy tale? I put down my book and looked at her. The golden light caught in her hair, and my heart did a familiar flip. I leaned over and kissed her softly. Nope. No, she asked, a confused little smile on her lips. Fairy tales have dragons and drama, I said. This is much, much better. She laughed, the sound bright and clear as a bell. I pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair and the sweet smell of the late-blooming roses in our garden. I looked at the trees, the creek, the distant mountains, and felt a sense of peace so profound it filled every part of me. I came into this world as a joke, a pawn in someone else's story. I wasn't looking for power or riches. All I ever wanted was a quiet life. One house, one person to share it with, good food and slow days. To watch the seasons change from my own backyard. And I have found it. It was more than enough. It was everything. And